Three things about this week. One, there's going to be a huge boost of assistance, the likes of which we have not received in a very long time. Two, there's going to be big adventure energy to the week. And three, there's going to be some power surges, power disruptions, power outages, or something that is so unpredictable and out of the blue. Hello and welcome. This is the Astrology of the Week Ahead podcast. I'm your host, your astro bestie, Chani Nicholas. In this episode, we are talking about the week of June 9th. I have been holding my breath for this week, at least for what this week begins, because on June 9th, we enter a 12-month period of help, of getting help, of receiving the help, of receiving the nourishment, of receiving the nurturance, of receiving the care and receiving the assistance that we so desperately need right now. And I'm going to say this, whatever has been challenging for you, especially over the course of January, February, March, and April, is now going to start to get easier, or you're at least going to get some help with it. Why? Because Jupiter is the planet that we call the greater benefic. Jupiter is the planet that bestows or reflects a time that bestows some sweetness and some help and some gifts and blessings to us. Not because that's how the universe works and we just get a moment with like a fairy godmother. Although, I mean, there's a little bit to that. There are moments that are just a little easier. And this moment is giving us help inside of a very difficult moment. So I'm not saying that like everything gets easy now, but what I am saying is that we get help. Yes, we are in a tremendously challenging moment where the systems that we have had to depend on, that we have had to rely upon are, malfunctioning, crumbling, not working in the same way. And we know that with this week and into the next 12 months, we get the type of help that we need in this moment. And this is how we optimize it. We care. That's the deal. Jupiter, the planet of benevolence and abundance and wisdom, is moving into Cancer on June 9th, on Monday. And that means that we are initiated into a 12-month period, because that's how long Jupiter spends in each sign, of help. And we can help that help increase, help me help you type of vibe. We can help that help increase by being the bringers of nourishment and nurturance and care. Because Cancer, listen, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So it's up on high. It's able to function in a way with a great amount of ease, or in many ways with a great amount of ease, no matter the dumpster fire we find ourselves in, which we do. We find ourselves in a dumpster fire. Thank goodness Jupiter is here. Would it be nice to have Jupiter in Cancer bestow its blessings upon us when things were already easy? Yes, that would be great, because then things would be like extra good. But, I'll take what I can get at this point. And because we started the year, January, February, March, and April with Mars retrograding and then direct in Cancer, making things so hard in terms of getting what we need, nourishment, nurturance, feeling connected to people, feeling like, there was some bonds and there was some goodness and sustenance between us, because that was so degraded because Mars is in its fall in Cancer. So that was like exceptionally hard those months. This is supposed to, if the astrologies, this is supposed to now help us in that part of the world, in that part of our life, and especially in that part of our chart. This is what I need you to do. I need you to go to the Chani app on Monday, and I need you to read your Jupiter in Cancer horoscope. I need you to understand where Jupiter in Cancer is blessing you. And I need you, if you are a subscriber to the app, then I need you to listen to your weekly reading. And listen, if you're not a subscriber to the app, we solve that problem for you. All you need to do is go into the app and use the code Saturn30, and you will get 30 days of an all access, absolutely free premium content pass to the app so that you can listen to your reading for Jupiter entering Cancer, both in this week's reading, but also in the yearly reading. And specifically in this year's reading for Q2, for the second quarter of the year. Go and listen to your yearly reading. Go and listen to your weekly reading on us for free. Doesn't matter if you've subscribed to the app before or not. Just use the code Saturn30 and the whole app is open to you because we need you to understand how to work with this bountiful, beautiful blessing amidst all the things. I need you to think back to 2013 to 2014, specifically from June of 2013 to June of 2014. What worked in your life? What grew? What was blessed? What was easy? What was the help that came to your doorstep? Who held your hand? Who helped to fill you up? Who nourished you? What buoyed you? What was like, oh, wow, I feel abundant in this area of my life? What did you receive from June of 2013 to June of 2014 that was helpful? It doesn't mean that your life was amazing that whole time, but given whatever was happening at that time, what finally started to work? That was the last time that Jupiter was in Cancer. So you can look back to that time period for a little clue as to what might be happening over the next 12 months. So Jupiter moves through the same sign every 12 years for about 12 months, 12, 12, 12. You can also think back to the time when you were 12 and get a pretty good understanding of what it meant to have Jupiter return back to the sign it was in when you were born. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get there when we get to the AMAs. Ask me anything. We're going to talk about Jupiter returns. Okay, so that's the first and foremost thing. That happens on Monday. Jupiter enters Cancer. I need us to understand one thing about especially this first week, but also the first couple months of Jupiter in Cancer, but especially this first week. Saturn just moved into Aries, right? That's why we're giving you the code Saturn30 to use in the Chani app for free content. Saturn just moved into Aries, and now Jupiter just moved into Cancer. And so naturally, those two signs are in what we call a square. This is what you need to understand about a square in astrology. It's a point of friction. It's not a tug of war. That's an opposition. It's not like who's going to win. It's like we meet, we're both coming down the different alleyways, and all of a sudden we bump into each other. One 90-degree angle to the other. I don't know if that's a real math thing to say. It's a 90-degree angle. And it's that point at the 90-degree angle, that point of friction that teases out an action. So is a square a good thing? It's a challenging thing. It's not good or bad. I don't like good or bad. It's challenging. So this is the deal. Jupiter moves into Cancer on Monday. And immediately by Sunday, we meet a challenge to that good thing, to that helpful thing. And this is how I want us to frame it. Jupiter in Cancer brings us abundance. It brings us assistance. It brings us some nourishment, and it definitely amplifies the need to, yes, care and nurture what we want to bring forth. Immediately, it meets up against Saturn, which is like a no or a wall or like a slow down kind of sign. And so Jupiter in Cancer wants to give, which is great. And Saturn in Aries is like, hold on, no, absolutely not. Stop that. You cannot give that. Or you cannot go to all those places or do all those things. You have to choose. Jupiter expands, Saturn contracts. Jupiter is in one of the best signs it can be in. It's in its exalted sign. Saturn is in one of the hardest signs it can be in. It's in the sign of its fall, its struggles. So we have to work within the boundaries and the constraints that might be absolutely unreasonable or not exactly something that is fair or that we should have to work within, but we do. Jupiter is saying yes, Saturn is saying no. And that's the point of friction that we work with during this first week of Jupiter in Cancer. They'll remain in that friction-based relationship with each other until September. When we get to September, I want you to know this, September, October, November, December, and into January of 2026, there's only a greater ease that happens. So we're getting assistance. It's getting met with a little bit of resistance for the first couple of months. But by the time we get to September, things are going to be much easier. And this is what I want us to think about. Okay, I want to grow myself into this thing, or I want to grow this thing, or I want to boost this thing in my life or in the world. What are the limits and the boundaries and the structures that I need to adhere to in order to really make this thing a possibility? Because we need both. We need the expansion of Jupiter and we need the contraction of Saturn. And so when we respect the limits and the boundaries and the constraints of reality of the moment, then we actually know what we can get away with. We actually know, like, okay, I only have 5 cups of water. I don't have 17. I have 5. What can I do with this amount of water? How can I spread it over the plot of land that I have? How can I, whatever it is I want to do with the thing that I have, this is this beautiful resource that I've got, Jupiter and Cancer, and it's limited at the moment, not forever, just at the moment. Okay, great. I want to know what my boundaries are. I want to know what the constraints are. I want to know what kind of quality of time I'm working within. And for the next 3 months, June, July, and August, for the next 3 months, I'm going to work in terms of being conservative with my resources, in terms of respecting limits and boundaries and the, time that I've got to work with. And then I know that by September into October, November, December, etc., it's going to be a lot easier. And that's because in September, Saturn's going to move back into Pisces, which is a supportive relationship with Cancer. And these two are going to have much more flow. So for the next 3 months, yes, we're getting assistance. Yes, we're getting tested, but we've got the assistance we need within the test. You see what I mean? We've got what we need to deal with the crunchy moment. It doesn't mean it's not crunchy. It doesn't mean that we don't have the help that we need. We have to kind of like balance those two things in our mind. And then I want us to think, okay, how can I do the hard work now? Or how can I do the respecting of limits and constraints and boundaries so I get the rest and the nourishment and the nurturance that I need so that by September, this is easier. This is easier. This is all I know, right? Like I'm an entrepreneur. I'm somebody who has worked for myself for most of my life. So this is kind of the model that I know. So forgive me if this doesn't apply to you. But this is what I know. When you start something, when you launch something like a company or a business or whatever, a product, you have to have like a big, huge amount of launch energy. It has to like burst out the gate. And over time, you're not going to be able to maintain that level of enthusiasm, nor should you have to. The thing should kind of take flight on its own. And so I want us to think about like, okay, we're going to need this kind of like ability to do something that in the friction of the moment, like, okay, for the next 3 months, we're going to like give it our all in this area of life. And then it's going to start to find its way in September. See if that works for you when you're thinking about this. And then also see if the viewpoint of thinking back to 2013, 2014 works for you. What was easy? What was good? What was helpful? What did you learn about care and nourishment? And if none of those things resonate with you, just think about this. How can I nourish myself? How can I care really deeply for myself? How can I not placate or stay in like a comfort zone that just keeps me dull and asleep and kind of lazy? How do I actually nourish myself and challenge myself? And if I was going to maybe boil everything down between Jupiter and Cancer and Saturn and Aries to one thing, I would say that. How do you nourish and challenge? nourish enough to make the challenges exciting, and then challenge myself enough, but not so much that it taxes my reserves of nourishment. And that actually like challenging myself to nourish myself too. Okay, how are those little metaphors for you? All right, that's the big boost of assistance that we are receiving this week and for the next 12 months. Happy Pride. Venus is also in Taurus. We've got the two benefics in two of the best signs they can be in, which means there's a lot of sweetness and a lot of abundance and a lot of reason to feel like connected, abounding in the air, in the ethers right now. Okay, the next big thing that happens this week is on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we've got a full moon in Sagittarius. This is exciting. It is adventurous. It is spontaneous. It is driven to explore. So it's like really exciting and stimulating. And this full moon is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter just moved into the sign of its exaltation. So again, it gives us a signal of something being heightened, something being really prosperous, and something being very nourishing that is also adventurous. This full moon is supported by most things in the sky. It can't witness Jupiter, or Jupiter can't witness it. So it's a little disjointed from the blessings, and also this full moon is sitting in a square to the nodes. So we are halfway in between the last eclipse season and the next eclipse season. What does that mean? It means that with this full moon, I do believe there will be some kind of pivotal or important decision or turning of events that is connected to whatever happens midweek for us. So I want us to just take note of like, okay, midweek, maybe it signals something that's connected to whatever happened 3 months ago or what's going to happen 3 months from now. Or maybe it just feels like, whoa, that changed. Like that thing happened, and then the events connected to this week shifted my course of direction, shifted my ideas about something, shifted a actual event in my life. I do think that what happens midweek is going to be like, oof, that was important. Like maybe it was subtle, but that kind of shifted or changed, or now I was going one way and now I'm going a slightly different way, but over time that leads me to a very different place. So just take note of like what you're being inspired by this week. What are you being excited by, and what do you have enthusiasm for, and what is sparking like your sense of adventure or your need to go on a big adventure? Could be like a learning adventure, could be a literal like physical traveling adventure, could be something that you are wanting to create, but it is like a call to adventure, and it is about a rapid kind of unfolding of events and something that's here to grow you. And then at the end of the week on Sunday, as Saturn makes that square to Jupiter, defining and refining how we're going to work with this blessing and how we're going to engage with our own spiritual, emotional, personal, collective growth, there's a very disruptive thing that happens. Something is loud, something is chaotic, something breaks, something gets tripped, a wire gets flipped. I don't know if that's a thing. A switch gets flipped, a wire gets tripped. There's something that gets cut out. It could feel like the lights go off and on. And I do think that there is that flickering of energy vibe or signature from Wednesday to Sunday. I do think that there is something, maybe even on Friday, something happens with the energy, with the power. And that could be something that you feel energetically like, oh, I have so much energy, and oh my God, I don't have any. And oh, it's back. It could feel a little unstable, a little rocky. And I do think there will be world events, like something that is like, oh, that was an accident. That wasn't meant to happen. We didn't think that would ever occur. Oops. That kind of thing can be very prominent with this astrology. The astrology is Mars square Uranus. It's loud, it's combustible, it's accident prone, it's wild, and it wants us ultimately to get free of something. So there is this like need and desire for freedom. It's just a little rude in its presentation. It's like, oh, I guess I could have asked for that nicely, but I didn't. That's the kind of vibe that Sunday brings, as well as this Jupiter-Saturn square that is, again, about bringing this huge opportunity down to reality. How do we take this big blessing of Jupiter and bring it down into the lived reality that we're experiencing right now? How do I make use of it? How do I be responsible to the things I have to be responsible to? How do I work with the blessing in a way that actually grounds it and brings it down into reality? Or what are the realities I have to contend with, even though I've got this help? And how can this help me with the realities I've got to contend with? Okay, so that's like the big overarching statements of the week. There's a lot going on this week. Those are the big pieces. And honestly, like Jupiter square Saturn is big for the year. It can be big for like the couple of years that it happens in. That's like big, big, big top level astrology that we don't really even know how we'll land in total until we've lived it out for a little while. And a full moon happening is big in and of itself. Jupiter changing signs is huge in and of itself. Saturn just changed signs. So there's like these bigger overarching storylines that we're living out. And then there's these little tiny pieces of astrology that are happening. On like a smaller level, Monday brings about some very important conversations that give us the limits and restrictions that we need to work within. The other thing I want you to remember about Monday is that there's going to be some relationship dynamics that are going to unfold. And it's really important to just meditate on the power dynamics in the relationship and in yourself. Like, are you doing something to feel better about yourself because it signals that you're more powerful? Or are you doing something in a relationship so that people won't be upset with how powerful you are? Are you dimming your light down? Are you amplifying it in a way that is like, that's unnecessary? What is the power dynamic that is getting set off on Monday? Monday's small astrology is Mercury makes a square to Saturn and Neptune, which is the important conversation. And Venus makes a square to Pluto, which is the deep unearthing of a relationship dynamic. On Wednesday, however, Mercury makes a sextile to Venus during the full moon. And that's a really, really beautiful, helpful conversation. So it feels like whatever is teased out on Monday, there's something that smooths things over or helps us to understand one another that occurs by Wednesday. And then on Friday, the sun makes a square to the nodes, but that's very baked into Wednesday's astrology, meaning there's this pivotal changing situation or something happens over the course of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that's like, ooh, that's different now, or things are different now, or that event that occurred on Wednesday has now shifted my perspective or my opportunities or my trajectory. Just that little bit, but enough to make it important and to take note of. All right, that's the astrology. That's the wrap up. And I just want to say, this week brings us like this crunchy moment with the blessings. But next week, and the week after, we are having two of the best things that are going to be happening in 2025 occurring. First, we're going to have Jupiter and the sun coming together. It's a Jupiter cazimi. It's so good in Cancer. And then we're going to have a Cancer new moon with Jupiter and with Venus in Taurus supporting it. It's so good. That's June 24th. That's the Jupiter cazimi. And then June 25th is the new moon in Cancer that has Jupiter snuggled right there, which is, again, just so gorgeous, so helpful, such a beautiful new beginning. So that's in a couple of weeks, but I want you to mark your calendars. I want you to circle things. I want you to know that like this opening of Jupiter in Cancer, it might feel a little bit more crunchy than you were expecting just because Saturn is sitting right there. But by the time that we get to the end of June, by the time we get to the 24th and 25th of June, there's just these really beautiful, helpful moments. And we're going to be planting some very special seeds with that astrology. So make sure you use the code Saturn30 so that you can be in the app with me and we can go through this ritual of planting seeds with this once in 12-year gorgeous moment of astrology because you want to work with this. And next week is the solstice. So we have the solstice, which is like this beautiful moment of energetic turning, the seasons change. There is a whole kind of like rush of energy. And then the next week, a couple of days later, we have the Jupiter Cazimi and then the new moon in Cancer with Jupiter right there. And it is like top shelf astrology. So again, Saturn 30, come back, join me in the app. All right, I wanted to answer a question about Jupiter and specifically about Jupiter returns. What are they? What do they mean? What can I expect from them? Well, Jupiter returns happen about every 12 years. And that means that about the age of 12, about the age of 24, about the age of 36, about the age of 48, you get the picture, you go through a Jupiter return. Now, Jupiter returns are times where you come to understand, in part, what Jupiter in your chart means, what your natal Jupiter means. A part of the seed potential, the blueprint of the potential for your Jupiter placement is enacted, is reignited when you go through your Jupiter return. Jupiter returns will take about a year. That's the amount of time that Jupiter will be in the same sign it was in when you were born, again, once every 12 years. So the best way to think about it, I think, for me at least for sure, my Jupiter has a lot to do with astrology. The ninth house is astrology in your chart. So just know that anything that happens in your ninth house is really important as it pertains to your relationship with astrology, amidst a million other things like media and publishing and religion and law and philosophy, and just like thinking about the big meanings of life, like what are we here for? What does it all mean? All of that stuff is connected to the ninth house, teaching, learning, spirituality. And for me, when I went through my Jupiter return, it was the first time I was really made aware of astrology. And it just so happens that Jupiter has a lot to do with my ninth house and my career. So when I was 12, I was introduced to this spiritual tradition, to this wisdom tradition, I should say, that would eventually become my life's calling and my life's work. Of course, I didn't know that then. I was 12 years old, but it was the first time I had a full astrological reading, and it blew my mind. I was like, what is this thing that this person is saying? I feel like it's a language that I know, but no one has ever spoken to me, but I get what she's saying. And she talked about my whole family's astrology charts. It was like a 5-hour reading. It was like my dad, my stepmom, my stepsister, my stepbrother, and me. And everything she said, I was like, yes, 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 that's it. It felt so validating. I felt so witnessed, and I was obsessed with it. And she had written a book, and my dad bought me that book. And that was the beginning of my astrological journey, was during my Jupiter return, my very first Jupiter return. So 12 years old is the first time we have a Jupiter return. So it doesn't mean that that's what should have happened for you. But it does mean that it reveals something about the nature of your Jupiter placement. So whatever house Jupiter is in and whatever house Jupiter rules or houses Jupiter rules in your chart. So this is the deal. Jupiter rules the houses in your chart that contain Sagittarius and Pisces. Those are the traditional signs that Jupiter rules. And we could also think of as a third way of understanding this, Jupiter also ruling the part of your chart that contains Cancer, because Jupiter is the exalted ruler of Cancer. So definitely think about the two areas of your life that are represented by the house in your chart that contains Sag and the house in your chart that contains Pisces, and the house that Jupiter is in, the natal placement of your Jupiter. And also you can think of this other thing like, okay, well, where's Cancer in my chart? Because Jupiter is the exalted ruler of that part of my chart as well. You can add that for flavor if you want. If you already understand the fact that Jupiter rules the part of your chart that contains Pisces and the part of your chart that contains Sag. And I know that this is a little in the weeds, but it's really important. We go through it in great detail in the Saturn return course, because all of you that are having your Saturn return right now, You need to understand what house Saturn lives in, and then also what houses Saturn rules in your chart. So if you're going through your Saturn return, go to the Chani app and listen to the Saturn return course, because it will guide you into understanding the part of your chart that contains your Saturn and then the parts of your chart that Saturn also rules. Okay, same thing for Jupiter. If you're going through a Jupiter return, if you have Jupiter in the sign that it's in right now, then you're going through a moment of understanding what your natal Jupiter's capacity is. It's always going to be a moment of growth. But, Jupiter, like everything else in the sky in your chart, it means something, and then it's up to us how we use it. So Jupiter returns are going to be a time of magnification. But whatever gets magnified is very specific to you in terms of what needs to get magnified. And again, it's very specific to where Jupiter is in your chart and to the houses that it rules. So go and read your Jupiter placement in the Me tab in the Chani app, and you'll get a much better understanding. And then go and check the transit section of the app and see if under long-term transits, Jupiter is transiting something else in your chart, and then read what it means to have Jupiter transit to your natal Jupiter, Jupiter conjunct Jupiter, your Jupiter return. All right, y'all, I hope that was helpful. Sending you so much love, so many blessings. Come back next week and we will talk about the solstice and the turning point that it's going to bring us into, and the excellent astrology that's going to follow it, and everything else that's happening next week. Bye for now.